When it comes to following up giant blockbuster albums, Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here remains one of the crown jewels of subsequent releases. It captures a lot of the same creativity, epic music arrangements and soundscapes, and thought-provoking lyrical content that made Dark Side of the Moon a bestseller. But unlike so many follow-ups that just repeat the same beats from the previous album, Wish You Were Here is its own unique entity. There are a lot of people who would call this Pink Floyd's best record, including some of the band themselves.
I think it's our best album. I will listen to that album for pleasure. There's not many of the Floyd albums I can.
It paid off on the charts as well. Wish You Were Here was Pink Floyd's fastest-selling album, now having signed with Columbia Records for their US releases. Hypnosis once again provided some unique artwork. According to Storm Thurgeson, these different images were meant to represent the four elements.
I got very preoccupied with four. There were 4 words in the title, 4 members of the band, and 4 elements to life.
Water, earth, fire, air.
Great minds think alike. I gotta say, out of my vast record collection, this is one I find myself putting on very often. I don't know, there's something very soothing about even just having it on in the background. And of course, if you want to just sit down and enjoy it, it's a truly engaging listen as well. However, do I consider it to be better than Dark Side of the Moon? Well, let's get into it. A quick shout out to JOHN EDGINTON's documentary The Story of Wish You Were Here, a great source for researching this album, and once again his videos here on YouTube are eye-opening as well. As I mentioned, Dark Side was an unprecedented success, and the subsequent tour found the band starting to perform bigger venues. They brought Dick Perry to play his sax parts, and recruited a few different backup singers before the Blackberries, Vanetta Fields and Carlina Williams, became regular tour members. By 1974, the iconic circular screen joined the tour, displaying accompanying visuals and animations by Ian Eames and later Gerald Scarfe. But the band was faced with a dilemma. How do we follow up Dark Side of the Moon?
You don't know what you're in it for anymore. You know, you were in it to achieve massive success. When they're all suddenly done, you're going, well, why? What next?
Indeed, when they got back into the studio, they were very unsure which direction to head in, so they decided to revisit their concept called Household Objects, meant to be music made up entirely of household objects.
We'd spend days getting a pencil and a rubber band till it sounded like a bass. I remember sitting down with Roger and saying, Roger, this is insane.
Thankfully, though, this idea was eventually scrapped, minus one piece called Wine Glasses, which would kick off the upcoming album. Tensions between members were already starting to grow. While Roger Waters had been the group's unofficial leader, he really started taking command, wanting the conceptual and lyrical side to take precedent, while David Gilmour and Rick Wright were more purists about the musical side of things.
Well, Dave particularly was very against doing anything. Why can't we just stand on stage and play the songs? Well, it'll be boring.
Fortunately, they did have a few developing pieces which would become part of their live set for the second half of the Dark Side tour.
We worked in this rehearsal room in King's Cross in London. We came up with what became Shine On You Crazy Diamond, Dogs and Sheep from the Animals album.
Shine On You Crazy Diamond would be dedicated to their original band leader, Syd Barrett. Ultimately, the other 2 pieces would be shelved until the next album, which Dave vehemently disagreed with. He later realized Roger's concept dealing with the theme of absence was the right direction, because in many ways, they really did feel absent from these sessions. Like Echoes on Live at Pompeii, Shine On is split into 2 parts, which open and close the album. And I'm just gonna say this right here, this is the best opening to any Pink Floyd record. Maybe even one of the best openings to any record, period. Whereas Speak to Me starts off Dark Side building tension, Shine On feels more like an invitation. Like you're entering this beautiful theater. Come on in, relax, take a seat while we prep you for this musical experience. Those wine glasses I mentioned creep in with layers of keyboards, including Rick's Mini Moog, which introduces the G minor piece. Dave follows him with a clean guitar solo. And then, as the volume of the glasses and the keyboards fade, we get those magic 4 notes. This guitar motif is what kicked off writing Shine On and inspired Roger to write the brilliant words to soon follow. David played his Strat through a Highwit amp in the studio they reserved for classical ensembles, with the mics all the way at the back. So the reverb and echo is astonishing, like the sound is being heard from a distant mountain. Honestly, if this guitar part was the only thing to come from this album, it would still be worth listening to. The complex emotions tied with this simple selection of notes, it's breathtaking, and the silence in between creates so much tension. Then Nick Mason's drums come pounding in, and the resolution to a C gives the piece an uplifting feel, as if to say, "This one's for you, Syd." Sonically, the piece and album itself, engineered this time by Brian Humphreys, sound much more dry in comparison to Darkside, like you're right there in the studio with them. And from then on, Dave just keeps playing these incredible blues licks, never too flashy, but just right for the emotion of the song. And he just keeps going, all instrumental. There's a brief breakdown where Rick takes over on his Moog synthesizer, a more melancholic approach. And then there's another guitar solo, the intensity continuing to build more and more. At about the 8-minute 45-second mark, we finally get a lead vocal from Roger, whose voice is higher and more revealing than we've yet heard. He's joined by Dave and Rick's harmonies, along with the Blackberries joining in for that magnificent gospel-style chorus. The music is so geniusly written, from the melody to the accompanying chords. In fact, here's something I just realized. Guy Pratt pointed this out, thank you. The first 3 chords in the vocal section of Shine On are very similar to those heard in Astronomy Domine. I gotta believe that's intentional. The lyrics, once again written solely by Roger, are just magnificent. But they're also very sad when you consider they're about Syd's breakdown. Now there's a look in your eyes, like black holes in the sky. You were caught in the crossfire of childhood and stardom, blown on the steel breeze. Oh, they're so beautiful.
It describes how I experienced his disintegration. And it describes as well the great desire I had then and still have now to celebrate him and his talent and his humanity, and to express the love that I have for him.
While I don't consider his voice to be as good as Dave's, I think this may very well be Roger's best vocal, really reaching for that emotional peak. And it can only be followed by a gorgeous sax solo by Dick Perry, probably my favorite solo he ever played. It's accompanied by another majestic guitar riff from Dave and a change in tempo from Nick. This first part of Shine On is as good as anything off of Darkside. It's on par with Echoes for me, and I can already see why so many people would call Wish You Were Here Pink Floyd's best record. But if I really had to be nitpicky... I know, but there is a problem with the first part of Shine On You Crazy Diamond. It's too good. What? Every time I finish this masterpiece that's practically akin to Beethoven or Stravinsky, I feel like the record has already peaked. In fact, it's kind of like listening to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Once you've heard the famous first movement, it's hard for the rest of the piece to live up to it.
We already heard the dum-dum-dum-dum. The rest is just filler.
And Shine On is only the first track. We still have a whole album to go through. So just by law of nature, I can't say I find Welcome to the Machine quite as engaging. Oh, it's still a brilliant track, don't get me wrong, But Welcome to the Machine is very different. The more organic band-driven vibe is replaced by pulsing synths, acoustic guitars, and Dave taking the heavy vocal this time, with Roger supporting him in a lower octave. It's like the idealism of Shine On has been corrupted by this nefarious electronic atmosphere, a dark portrait of the music business. Rick's synth textures are so violent in comparison to the gentler acoustic guitars. As we change to 3/4, it's like the acoustic guitars are trying to say something, but the clutches of the machine-driven music business keep corrupting the skin of the innocent musical artist. Though there is some levity here. The line, "You bought a guitar to punish your ma," is absolutely wonderful. I suppose you can feel it as revealing the sinister truth of what happened to Syd, and the elevator leading up to the crowded gathering I've always interpreted as the fear of having to rejoin society after being exposed or awoken to this evil machinery. Let's flip the record and kick off side 2 with Have a Cigar. I have to admit, when I first heard the song, I thought it was the band attempting to write another Money, considering how popular the single was. But it really is its own animal, thanks in part to a guest vocal by Roy Harper, after both Roger and Dave had a hard time laying down the vocal themselves. The lyrics are more tongue-in-cheek, once again taking shots at the record companies, including one of Roger's most iconic lines, which is based on a true comment. It's odd hearing an outsider sing a lead vocal, especially with lyrics, but Roy's vocal does give the song a feeling of intrusion, presumably a record exec. This theme would also be reflected on the image of a man getting burned. And they really did light a stuntman on fire for that image, it's not airbrushed. So now let's turn the radio dial to see what we can come up with. With that radio effect, we get the iconic 12-string opening to the title track. Once again, the line came from Dave.
A bit like the beginning of Shine On with those 4 notes. Roger's ears pricked up and he said, what's that?
The acoustic-driven Wish You Were Here is one of Pink Floyd's most famous tunes and a staple of classic rock radio. Dave's vocal really does carry the guilt and sadness of losing Syd, but it could also be seen as missing the camaraderie Roger once had with his bandmates.
I sort of knew that really we were over as far as the band of brothers, and we were never going to be that again. And so I was mourning that loss as well.
And once again, harking back to the blues, the music does have a more positive quality to it, with Rick's piano licks and Dave's acoustic picking. Syd's absence has left a hole in so many people's hearts, but the memories of the once shining figure are still with us forever. And I think it's very honorable in the wake of the enormous success of Dark Side of the Moon that the band would use their follow-up to shine a spotlight on the man who made all of this possible. Finally, we come to the second part of Shine On. The transition of wind, like a desolate desert, connects us to Roger's pulsing bass line, Rick's haunting synth melodies, and a killer slide solo from Dave. We come back to the main melody. I find the line most intriguing when Roger sings "Pile on many more layers, and I'll be joining you there." Is Roger foreshadowing that he too will go mad and estrange himself from his bandmates? Time will tell. A funk jam featuring Rick's clav is followed by a keyboard piece to close out the tune with the return of the wine glasses, this time in a major key. And as icing on the cake, Rick teases the melody to See Emily Play.
Emily tries but misunderstands.
So that's Wish You Were Here, but there's one more story that I think needs to be told. At some point, as they were allegedly working on Shine On You Crazy Diamond, a visitor came into the studio, a big weird bloke with a shaved head and shaved eyebrows, brushing his teeth in the studio.
Well, my memory was coming into the control room and seeing this large bloke in a raincoat.
I had no idea who he was for a long time, and neither did anybody else, I didn't think, for a while.
It took a long time before somebody finally realized that's Syd, the legend himself, the miner for truth and delusion, right there in the studio.
We've always argued about who spotted him first. I naturally think I did.
It was a real shock because I hadn't seen him really, since his breakdown, when he was this very good-looking guy, and this is huge, bloated guy. Why would he turn up? Why would actually writing a song about him? Very strange.
And this would indeed be the last time anyone from Pink Floyd ever really interacted with their original leader. It is easy to see why so many fans, even Dave and Rick themselves, consider Wish You Were Here Pink Floyd's crown jewel. There's so much to admire here, from the concept to the lyrics to the musicality, the performance, the production. It's all masterfully crafted and a worthy successor to Dark Side of the Moon. But is Wish You Were Here better than Dark Side of the Moon? I would say no. Believe me, I would gladly put either one of these albums on the turntable right now, but if I really had to be nitpicky, I would say that Wish You Were Here doesn't quite have the perfect pacing of Dark Side of the Moon. Dark Side starts off slow with Speak to Me and Breathe and builds up into the climax of Eclipse, but here, it's like this album's eclipse has already happened in the beginning. But that's also what makes Pink Floyd's different records so engaging. I'm glad they didn't try to top Dark Side and just followed their musical instincts instead. And by no means is it going to stop me from giving this album a well-deserved goldfish. It's another must-have for your vinyl collection. The essential track is, no question for me, the first part of Shine On You Crazy Diamond. Of course, the title track is a classic, and the other tracks are great too. I am glad there do exist versions of Shine On where they combine elements from both halves, especially the one on Pulse. But you definitely don't want to miss out on listening to this original record, and it's worth repeating that it's best if you listen to the entire album in one sitting. Pink Floyd really has been on fire for the past few years, but are these developing tensions going to affect the next few albums? Well, we'll talk about them next time.